My bad, brother. My connection was lagging right now, so I was in and out. Matt, you want to answer that if you can?
I mean, yeah, essentially what Tracker was saying, what everybody's saying. I think inflation doesn't. It's just going to happen, right? So that means market caps of crypto, of stocks, of whatever. It's not really going to mean that much. So like when I made a price video about like XRP going to $250 like a couple weeks ago, everybody's like, "Ah, that's impossible. The market
Jeez,
cap would be
what?
crazy." Yeah, I made a video about it just because it's not mathematically impossible, is what I was trying to say. I'm not saying it's going to get there. I'm just saying it's not. But yeah, the market
Say
cap
it's
would
humanly
be.
impossible, but I'm sorry. Go. Oops.
But it's not impossible. But it's people like the market cap, market cap, market cap. But that doesn't mean the amount of money flowing into it. That's just our valuation. So we can wrap our little brains around something. But if like the dollar value keeps going down and down and down, then market caps are not really going to matter at all, right? And if you can just like go look at USDT Tether, just in the past week they printed 1.57 billion Tether, right? And it's at an all-time high for market cap. They keep printing more, which is a good sign for basically crypto to keep going up as well because Tether keeps printing more and more and more, which is a more a sign that nothing really matters when it comes to market cap because the printing of money, the money supply, the everything just keeps going up. So eventually, I don't think it's going to matter at all.
Yeah, I think it's useful to look back pre-pandemic, pre-2020, when quote unquote the U.S. had little inflation or no inflation. Well, I mean, short answer is that's not factually true. Just because CPI was reporting low inflation doesn't mean there wasn't any. But what was really happening there, remember, like this was some of the absolute best performance years of every asset class, including Bitcoin. Bitcoin was, I mean, purely just straight up only. You could say just roughly from uh, uh, 2009 to 2019, up only. Well, how is that possible if you had quote unquote no inflation or very little inflation? It's because debasement was constantly happening that whole entire time. We've never once pretended, at least in the US, that we're going to spend less than we take in or balance the budget or any sort of fiscal responsibility. That the only thing that politicians, and I say both sides of the aisle, the only thing they'll tell you is like, oh, we're going to grow our way out of it. Well, that I mean, one, I don't think that's feasible, but two, like that means that no one's interested in cutting anything. Spending year after year seems more locked in and grandfathered in than having a second and third look, like, is this actually a smart reason to be keep debasing the currency? So like, even if CPI, moving forward, even if CPI starts reporting 2.1%, 1.9%, 1.5%, forget all that, because it's not like your Western governments are trying to balance their budgets. It's not like they're trying to turn off the money printer. It's not like they're all of a sudden exercising fiscal responsibility.
Yeah, I agreed with that completely.
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin right now looks like it's kind of it's locked and loaded at the 67K area. It looks like it just wanna run.
And I think it does. I think it floats up straight into the conference. I mean, hell, maybe day one, or maybe it just floats up unabated until Trump takes the stage. But I think that might still be a local top, just a little local top. But you know what? Like a local top of 74K, I'll take it. Like, who wouldn't?
Right. And I mean, to speak about the conference a little bit, I mean, I do think that if, I mean, so the first person I saw posting about the Trump announcing Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset is Dennis Porter, the who's from the Satoshi Action Fund, and he's someone I follow for a while, and I highly respect the work that he does. And he's been saying that, and it looks like he does have some insider scoop, if you will. But if that came into reality, if that the idea does manifest, short term, like, yeah, it could be a topic, it could whatever. But I think that really would have a very significant long-term impact repercussions on Bitcoin. Because if Trump, and I say this from the perspective of, if you're a foreign leader, right? If you're the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, if you're the president of China, if you're a global leader, and then you're looking at Donald Trump, who's likely the next presidential, who's the leading president candidate and likely the next president, going up there and talking about potentially taking Bitcoin on the U.S. balance sheet, then I think that kicks off like the game theory between nation states. How they're gonna approach Bitcoin, are they gonna put Bitcoin on their balance sheet, right? Should they front run this action? So I think once the nation states start really getting into that thinking, and they're not gonna think about it in terms of, oh, like, let's buy Bitcoin and it's gonna go up and we're gonna make money from it. No, like they print money, right? They don't need more money, but they're thinking, okay, like, is this a strategic advantage that my country should be taking advantage of, right? Is this something that could be another battleground between nation states? So when they start thinking about that, I mean, look, it only leads to two outcomes, right? It's really truly is a binary outcome. Either they become more supportive or they don't, right? And if they become more supportive, then there's be more volumes coming in to buy versus sell. So I think that could be quite a big deal if that does manifest, and in the long term, right? Ben, what's up, brother? What do you think?
Yeah, I tend to agree on the game theory between nations. I mean, everyone's going to be if the U.S. really does do that and puts it on their balance sheet, then I would think that others will follow suit. And I mean, there's a huge amount of capital flowing into it. So I think it would start to be standardized amongst more countries, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what an exciting time to be alive. I mean, this is truly, I think this cycle is the cycle where Bitcoin becomes real mainstream, real mainstream.
Also, what a cool time to be El Salvador and sit back and be and laugh and be the first one to do that.
You see what Trump said about El Salvador?
No, what did
He
he
was
say?
like, El Salvador, 70% crime down because they're shipping them here. He's savage for that.
All right.
But yeah, I don't think it's just going to be Bitcoin. It's going to be everything. Like we've seen what's happening with centralized control, with like CrowdStrike and all that stuff going down. Like they control a lot of power, and people are starting to realize that maybe decentralization could be the way of the future. I think.
Yeah, for sure. Decentralization, just we just know from biology and everything else,
Yeah.
it's much more stable.
The government knows it
So
too. That's why they don't want it, though.
Yeah. And what did CrowdStrike erase with that outage, though? What did they erase? What are they hiding?
Right?
Yeah. That's another topic, I guess, right?
We know something.
hey, I've got to go. But my last thing is I left a link up for Peter Zion. He is the biggest brain on
I'll pin it.
global politics and demographics and anyway, you should look him up. Watch the little 4 minute thing I said. Don't do it now, or you'll get kicked out of the space. That's what happened when I was trying to look it up for you guys. But follow Peter Zion on YouTube. He is amazing, and he's written 4 amazing books as well. And if you like what you see on YouTube, you can get a lot of what he's got on YouTube. But all of his books are also available like on Audible, and I recommend listening to them on Audible because he reads it in his own voice. That's all I'll say.
Nice.
Peter Zion, highly recommend.
Nice. I'll definitely check it out. And then we'll probably wrap it up with talking about the miners so we can navigate that way. I'm surprised we did the whole conversation honestly today without really bringing them up. So that's pretty pretty raw of us to do because we're all pretty miner heads. But I made this post. Interesting to see that Wolf is leading the pack this year, guys. Who would have thought, honestly, for real?
Yeah, they've been crushing it. Definitely getting a premium, I think, on the nuclear hydro kind of redundancy of power, whether that's true or not. I think it's
They
interesting to
definitely.
see the kind of EVs of different companies like reset and pull away from one another based on growth, because Wolf doesn't have a lot of growth this year, right? Most of it's out in 2025. So they have a very, very high premium assigned, I think, to the narrative they built around nuclear and hydro is better than wind and solar or other distributed forms. Because I think if you look at their end of year exahash target is 10.2, and they're currently operating at 8.8, and they have I don't know, their enterprise value is like, this is kind of a weird metric, but 240.
Yeah, they're kind of, yeah, they're a little. They've definitely got a big premium in their valuation. Aren't they trading, like, who's looking at TradingView right now, or
I'm
Yahoo
looking at
Finance?
it.
Aren't they
I'm
trading
on
at literally
TradingView.
7? Okay, check them out. Isn't their price to book literally 7?
Let's see.
Is it even higher?
That sounds right, or
Yeah.
higher.
So for some perspective, guys, and those listening, that's double their competition. Like Marathon, CleanSpark, Iron, you name it. They're all trading at like 2.5 price to book, or maybe closer to 3. And you got Wolf trading at a 7. Like, I mean, I'm not trying to foot anyone's bags, but if I had a massive bag of Wolf that I've been holding year over year, I'm probably diversifying that.
Yeah,
Because
I
you
actually
just said, because,
both.
like, wait a minute, zoom out. They're not talking about any sort of major exponential growth for the back half of this year. Like, who's gonna? Are you gonna wait for their executives and insiders to sell first? Like, I don't. It's a pretty good valuation.
Yeah, I diversified some of my wealth last week into Bitfarms.
There you
Yeah, I mean,
go.
I think the miners generally look. I mean, they've had quite a run recently across the board. And and generally speaking, like, they follow Bitcoin price action. So for positive of Bitcoin price action coming up, then yeah, the miners should do well. But one thing that and that I'm a little bit concerned, and I'm just bringing up counter arguments, so that we're not both hearts here. We consider all the perspective. Is yeah, I mean, we saw Nvidia dropping like 18%, top to this local bottom here, without any major news, right? And SP had just had a massive bearish engulfing candle on the weekly. So did Nasdaq. So did the Dows and Jones. So it looks like the equities are kind of wanting to take a little breather here. And I was wondering, because like, and also like but IWM at the same time had the big breakout. So like, it would be interesting to see what the miners do if we get a positive, if Bitcoin keeps going up and grinding higher from here, but the equity kind of takes a slump. What's going to happen to the miners, right? You could have sell pressure from the equities market, but then you're going to have the buy pressure from the Bitcoin price action. It'll be quite interesting to see what happens here. And generally speaking, I mean, everyone's been talking about the election pump, and I do agree with that. Like, I think the market generally don't have some sort of black swan mega crash in an election year. But I mean, I think that, in order to have the election pump, and given that where we are with the markets right now, it's been up and only, like for the SP, for the Nasdaq, for, I mean, quite some time, like more than a year now, it's been up and only. So do in order for it to keep grinding higher and to get that November pump, don't we have to first correct a bit here, 5, 10, 12%, before we kind of resume the up and only and pump into election? um, or do we just keep grinding at all-time high and just keep going higher and higher and higher? Well, what is everyone's thought on that? In respective to the Bitcoin and miner price action.
We kind of just saw it on QQQ, didn't we?
You know, sideways and range bound is a direction too. If I had to guess, so one thing that's interesting is yes, we're looking at SPY and we're looking at QQQ, but also pull up equal weighted SPY ETF, and you'll see that there was no such sell off. Like everyone's getting a little worried about that big red weekly candle on SPY or QQQ, but look at equal weighted SPY. It was sideways. It was basically even month over month. So that tells you that okay, sure, maybe Nvidia is getting sold, but money's just moving farther out the risk curve. And I think people are right sizing their portfolios. But you know, money managers, smart money, hedge funds, you name it, family offices. I think people are just right sizing their portfolios going into earnings because you're about to have the Mag 7. You're about to have all the biggest boom, 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 one after another in the next week and two. So they're probably just right sizing their portfolios, making sure their percentages are correct, especially going into, like someone earlier said, you know, you're coming up on the back half of July, and August is typically a time to, you know, hit that last vacay before the fall push. Yeah, people are gonna make sure what they own makes sense, lighten up here, get more aggressive there, and then set it and forget it. Um, Before last holiday, probably.
Yeah, I think that's what's happening too.
Could we be witnessing kind of the distribution phase beginning on the mega cap and money rotating to the smaller caps? Right, that's a
Absolutely.
possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, I mean, you know, Nvidia might blow it out of the park again in about a month. I think they're the very last of the Mag 7 to report. I think you're what 40 days out, maybe it's 35, whatever. They're last. So you're already going to know by the time they come around. You're already going to know how Apple, Meta, Google, Tesla, you know, Amazon. You're already going to know how all the other major mega caps did, and Nvidia will just be the cherry on top, icing on the cake. So, um, uh, and just because and another thing, like just because the Mag 7 beats across the board, that doesn't mean that you as an investor are interested in buying Nvidia at like a 60, a 67 or a 75 PE. You know, maybe that's too rich for you. It's too rich for me. So, I mean, you're and us talking here. You know, if you're talking about Bitcoin miners, you are the very definition of going farther out on the risk curve and staying away from these super mega caps, looking for outsized returns. And we're not the only ones, obviously. So yeah, I think so. But Bitcoin's been range bound and consolidating since, let's face it, spring. Um, you could absolutely see the Mag 7 take a breather and Bitcoin get back on the horse.
Yeah, I can see that actually happening. What do you guys think about
Yeah.
Tesla's earnings? Are they going to miss it? I think so.
I don't really think it's going to matter too much because the chart already had an explosive move. So I just see things consolidating, maybe like a little bit down to sideways until maybe the big event in October. Who knows? I just think this earnings might be a little bit muted, in my opinion.
Yeah, because the expectations are low. So when expectations are low going into
Yeah.
earnings, it really doesn't affect the charts. Like last earnings, we had charts beat it. Like I took a L on TSM, they killed it, and their stock went absolutely down. So I guess sometimes earnings really doesn't matter. But what I'm be looking at is what their top index is, or what they're attached to, and the index wise, and how that's performing. So we'll see.
Yeah.
But let's see. Wolf is obviously, I think, gonna come down from number one soon. I can't see it holding up. I feel like a lot of the catalyst that helped them was paying off their debt early. I think that really maintained the price action to, you know, where they're currently hanging and shit. So it's interesting to see Mara so down on the list. So I feel like that mofo's due for a nasty run.
Yeah, there could be a rotation within the miners too, because Wolf had a couple of like just weeks really. They had a lot of sellers on like up in the the $6 range just to make the price close below like 560. You know.
I think you're seeing a bit of a rotation. I was making fun
Yeah.
of retail traders a month and a half ago, a month ago, You know that meme where it's kids drowning, like kids playing in the pool. One's jumping, one's starting to struggle, and one's a skeleton at the very bottom.
Yeah.
And I mean, it seems like a month ago, everyone was finding a reason why they needed to buy iron at $13, $14, $15, and that was just the exact wrong time to buy it. And sure enough, a month later, like iron is negative month over month. It's like negative 15% month over month. Clean Spark is like, I don't know, plus 3% or so month over month about tracking the performance of Bitcoin. And guess who's number one month over month out of that short list? It's Riot. Riot's over 20% month over month. It's even better if you timed the bottom wick of the end of the Germany selling, obviously. But even if you just took an arbitrary this time last month, yeah. Anyway, long story short, I think you're seeing some catch up
Yeah.
trade. There's definitely a rotation. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, and I mean, what about the recent Mara news? They got fined $100 million to Michael Ho.
That was a big settlement. Oof.
That is a big one, yeah, and it's kind of stupid move on their part, like to kind of cut him out. Like, could have been absolutely avoided.
What do you guys think of the price to book? Wolf, Bitcoin Bella post something, so I pinned it. So I thought that was an interesting data right there to look at.
Wolf and you know the other one that isn't talked about as much that has
Dreams
been on an
overvalued. Oh, I'm sorry. I just talked over someone. My bad.
it's all good. I was just gonna say Wolf, but also Hut. Hut has been on an absolute tear, which I think is
Sue's been
interesting.
shaking that ass
I don't
on
know.
Spaces, bro. She's killing it.
But this is what you want to see with all these miners is you want to see them all go up, and everyone's panicking why iron isn't continuing to go up and why clean spark isn't continuing, because they just sort of make the shift from what's the narrative at that moment, and the narrative always pushes the stock higher. And we're seeing a healthy shift where they're all just sort of going up at intervals, just like Matt was saying. Matt, you're totally nailing the markets in my opinion, like with earnings coming up with all the Mag 7 and the shift into IWM into small and mid caps. And that's what you want to see in a bull market, is a shift in, and it's a healthy rotation. And people think, oh my God, my Nvidia stock isn't going up anymore, or my iron stock isn't going up anymore, and then they panic, and that creates volatility. But this is a healthy thing, and I think we're sitting good. I mean, Bitcoin is doing great. Everyone's freaking out for no reason, and I think it's hilarious.
Well, also, if you price Iron and Wolf and others into BTC and not the USD, they're basically at support right now. So it's going to be an interesting week to see what happens, especially if Bitcoin goes up. I think the rest will benefit as well. So nothing is bearish in any of these miners, in my opinion, even if like they're lagging a little bit just because of the rotation within them.
Matt, I'm curious as to, like, from where we are currently with all the miners, like from here on until the cycle top, like who do you think the top performers are be, or who will your top picks be?
Is it me or Matt?
Or both of you, yeah, either one.
Yeah,
You go
Matt,
first. You
can go first.
Oh, okay, sure. So this time last year, I don't know where the tweet is. I'm not going to bother finding it and posting it. But this time last year, we were talking in the summer, like, you know, if you had to make a hypothetical new portfolio, what would it include? And I said, Riot, Clean Spark, Iron, more or less in that order. And no, okay, I didn't get the order of who would pop off first, second, and third, but yeah, I stand by those names. Like Clean Spark went on one of the best runs year over year since last summer out of all the miners. And then Iron, like you cannot be disappointed if you bought Iron at New Year's and held to today. Like you are killing it. And then I think here comes Riot bringing up the rear last but not least. So yeah, I think that's probably the answer for me. And I hold all my CleanSpark, and I've been accumulating and buying as much Riot as I could under $10 and a little bit under $9. So we'll see.
And when Bitcoin goes up, all of these stocks are going to go up. Coinbase, we had MicroStrategy this week was sort of the play, and it just went on a rip. And the miners were just sort of up marginally, and that's the rotation in the MicroStrategy. And I think when Bitcoin just decides when it's ready to go higher, it's going to bring everything up. MicroStrategy, Coinbase, all the miners. I mean, everyone's going to win, in my opinion.
To me, one of the best looking miner charts is Cypher Mining. It just had an explosive move, even though it had like a giant wick on the weekly. It's closed the weekly candle above like all levels since like 2021. So I mean that in my opinion is super bullish, and other miners haven't really seen that this week. So that's kind of like under the radar in my opinion. And also Mara is doing well. CLSK is doing well. Like Riot is actually still my least favorite because it still has a lot of resistance above, even though it had an explosive week from the bottom. So yeah, but I like Cypher Mining a lot here.
I don't get on a fundamental basis the excitement with Cypher this year is like unclear to me in terms of growth.
Yeah,
Obviously the chart looks good, the market is responding or something's going on there, but like when I think about who's going to be growing the most from where they're at right now, it's Riot and Iron probably, and then who has like a potential for some big news announcement around maybe an AI, HPC, or joint venture play are things that I would think would add a premium. But then Cypher, I guess, kind of disproves all of that because Cypher's absolutely ripping, and I think they're going to 13.5. Like Cypher at the end of the year will be at 13.5 exahash if they hit their target, and
yeah.
Iron will be at 30.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't Cypher announce that, you know what, we're ahead of schedule and our energization is going to be better than expected for the back half of this year and going into 2025. I thought that's what we could give some credit to their performance, their price performance.
They but it was like they boosted, I think in that they boosted their target to 13.5 exahash.
Oh, that was the
like,
boost. Oh, okay. Oh,
Well, that's one aspect of the story. If I can chime in here, like I've been posting about this. I don't want to pull up the charts, but Cypher has had earlier this year, like the entire year, the price action is somewhat muted, and part of the reason is because Bitfury has been unloading tens of millions of shares of Cypher, and they're the largest shareholder of Cypher. So I don't know if everyone here is aware, but the reason they're selling is not bearish. They just have employee shares invested, and the employees or former employees are located around the globe. So for jurisdictional reasons, they have to sell the shares and distribute the cash as opposed to giving them the shares directly. So they've been selling, and then early July I posted based on the ICC filing that Bitfury is basically done selling. At the time I posted, they probably had like 1 or 2 more days to go. They're done selling. So what I think another reason that can attribute to the price action last week was you have a big seller gun in the market, and that coincided with a pump in Bitcoin, and then the price kind of just took off from there. Like I was, I'm very surprised to see like a 27% move on Monday on Cypher. That just monster. But it also kind of speaks volume to like how depressed the price action has been because of this the existence of this big seller that just sell on every pump. Now that they're gone, we really get the peaceful action. I took some profits on my Cypher. I'm not gonna lie, because I had some short-term options that were up like quick 4x, so I had to take those off the table. But I still think Cypher could do well, maybe after a little cool off.
The one thing I have Cypher options, but the one thing I hate is that every time it does these highs, if you notice the candles on the dailies, there's always a wick on it. Like someone is definitely selling the shit out of it every time it gets to a high, which I hate to see. Where these other miners have more of a healthier candle looking pattern.
I think they're all doing that though. The market makers are peak fuckery. They're just playing the retail FOMO, and they're just manipulating the stocks. Like if you look at CleanSpark last week, it would rip in the mornings to $20, and then end the day at like 17.99, or I mean, just this horrible drop of just red candles all day long, and it happened like 2 or 3 times. And I mean, yeah, I just think they're just manipulating the stock because again, the M2, I think the market makers know the M2 money supply is coming, and they're just going to shake the tree and just accumulate as much as they can for the next 6 to 12 months because they know where Bitcoin's going to land.
Yeah, they all have pretty big weekly wicks up top too, so it's not just Cypher mining. Yeah.
Then I see we had some new people hop
Push
on.
to 68K.
68, baby. Let's go. What's up, David and Pradeep?
How are you?
Good, bro. How are you?
This is very well. So I apologize for jumping on late and not hearing much of what you fellows and ladies have been speaking about. But to just contextualize what happened last week, some of the smartest people in the history of markets are in the crypto space. There's no question about that. But they also need feedstock. They need liquidity. And liquidity that's going into crypto isn't a directly transmitted from M2, because what's happening, and you can see it from the behavior of the S&P 7 last week, that for a 6-day period catalyzed by the personal consumption expenditure deflator that came in light, and it didn't just come in light, it came in light and with the context of the upward revisions to PPI the next day. The deterioration of the trend of disinflation is rising unmistakably. And so there was a 1,200 basis point 5-day underperformance of the S&P 7 versus the Russell 2000. It's the greatest reduction in concentration in the whole wave that we've had, going to 35%, 17 trillion of the 50 trillion S&P 500. That's a lot of credit destruction. And you could see that the British 2-year gilt had deteriorated 155 basis points over the year to a new 1-year low. There's no demand for credit in England right now. They've already achieved their 2% target. They're holding their Fed funds at a 3.5% real yield. Christine Lagarde signaled bizarrely, or maybe not according to some, that they may not even cut more than once the rest of this year. And so what you have is rising money supply, but compression of the concentration. That's symptomatic, it's healthy, of deflation in risk assets. And on the pinned post that I just reviewed last week, there were 29 1-year or all-time highs in non-cyclicals, healthcare, utilities, staples, new home builders, which are a special case because there's 30 trillion of new home value and only 200 billion 150th of new home builder market value. And so you're having this money that naturally leaks out of overpriced sectors into underpriced sectors. But all you had last week was Apple hitting a new high on Monday. And then all you just saw is money flowing out. And the question is the selection of J.D. Vance good for crypto, or is it bad for crypto? He famously owns crypto, a significant amount of his wealth, but he also has fundamental policies that may not be so constructive for crypto in the intermeeting time frame. I mean, eventually it's very important. But if you start to see a compression of this concentration bubble, the greatest of all time, both in percentage and nominal terms, that's a lot of deflationary impulse. That's a lot of leverage implosion. And it's measured in so many places last week. I'll just highlight a few. Soybeans had a 4-year low. everyone remembers, and maybe they saw the video of Jeremy Siegel screaming at the Fed to raise rates because commodities were soaring in 2021 and they were doing nothing. They came into 2022 with an SEP, a summary of economic projections, that signaled only a 25 basis point hike in the entirety of 2022. And we all know they did 16 times that. They went 4.25. They took the rate up to 4.5. And so when they didn't follow commodities, inflation accelerated from 1.25 or 1.4 to 9%. Well, what happened to copper on Thursday? It was down 3.45%. It followed on another 1%. So you have all the softs, all the agricultural commodities, all the measurements of liquidity that can't be stored like oil in the ground by Saudi with their shut-in production. And gold is kind of a feature of oil, because if you just look at the density of oil relative to all the other commodities, you have oil is bigger than every other commodity combined. And so we're starting to see deflation in commodities. And as the money comes out of the big super tech, a lot of that can go into crypto, because it's just better quality in smarter people, not enough size. It's only $1 trillion for Bitcoin, $1.5 trillion for the whole space. But ultimately, are people seeing the accelerating flow? And I'm just posting right now the magnitude of crude oil relative to the entirety of all commodities. And that's being held up not by fundamentals. It's a supply and demand shift where Saudi and their friends are sitting on 5 million barrels. And we have to look at the chart I posted right below it, which is the market share under Trump. And I'm not a Trump supporter, I'm not a Trump voter, but when he came in, America had 11% market share. That went to 16 in 39 months. Our production went from 8.6 or 8.7 million barrels to 13.1 on February 28, 2000. We didn't exceed that until June of this year, 51 months later, once Trump finally exceeded Biden for the final time in the betting line. And so you look at oil, where it is. It was down 3.5 on Friday. You look at the betting line, you look at the Democratic Party having Clinton on the opposite side of Obama, what they want to do with Biden with 100 days left till the election. Trump getting supported by Silicon Valley, by Jamie Dimon. I mean, there's a lot of backers. Saudi Arabia sees the last 4 years, hey, let's just tighten supply, push up price, no competition coming from the US. They look back 5 years and they say, we lost 2% market share, the US gained 5. That's 700 net points. They did this back in 1985, and they under Reagan too, and they did it in 2008 under Bush too, where they drove oil down 70% in 70 days under Reagan, starting September 13th, 1985, and they drove it down in 6 months from July 11th, 2008 till January of 2009. And so what happens to inflation? What happens to real rates? What happens to food and energy and gas prices when Saudi does their pivot? We can look back to May of 1984 when the bond yield fell 6.9% in 23 months because falling oil and a falling dollar created a massive decline in inflation. Now, people may say, wait a sec, doesn't a falling dollar change your balance of payments, your terms of trade, and bring in more exports? Well, in economics, it's called the J curve, where you initially get less in terms of exports because the dollar value of your exports is going down before your increased volumes mask that. And so we literally had the dollar fall 50% versus the Deutschmark in that time frame when there was a Deutschmark. So what happens if the Fed, which was so late to the party because they're looking at their poorly constructed data sets, which are produced by 400 PhDs that were wrong by 400 basis points, 1 basis point per PhD in 2002. Do we have any expectation that they're going to get it right as commodities are essentially in free fall, except for the physically controlled ones? And so there's going to be so much money coming out of the S&P 7 as they decay. And if you don't get new highs this week, then you know the options dealers are going to go to town and they're going to be driving volatility down, which is just going to
Thank
change
you for
people's.
covering that.
Okay. Anyway, so I just want to highlight these risks on not focusing only on M2, but the other feedstock of money, which is money that was going into risk assets versus non-risk assets.
Yeah, no, absolutely, bro. And the option games for this next week and the following is critical. And I've been very vocal about that with my followers to just absolutely be careful, because if those big indexes really slip up, those option market makers are going to absolutely go to town on everyone. So you covered a very critical point for a lot of investors and traders in the option game. Thank you, brother.
Can I
Yeah,
throw
go
one
for it.
extra point
Go
on?
for it.
Because it just happened to show up on my feed, and I've been doing a spaces for a couple mornings through a different group, and I wanted to be able to find out how to communicate to them in language they're used to. I mean, I do want to get people to be able to sit on the other side of their own trade, whether it's an institution taking their paper, whether it's a hedge fund taking their paper, or a dealer desk. So I wanted to be able to see how these, online option platforms, market to people. And I was horrified what I heard. They literally say, don't worry about some of the second and third derivative risk. Our platform gives you embedded protection from those risks of charm and Vana. They're literally saying, if you always roll your option at day 21, you don't have any of these risks. And they don't understand this like Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Once everyone's focused on day 21, that then becomes the problem, not day 0. And so you properly pointed out to your people that as we get closer to an OpX, you always have an acceleration of gamma and delta exposure. But the problem is so much concentration, so much focus on the options means they haven't seen a market with falling equities on a sustainable basis and deflating volatilities. And so that's very harsh. So when you say to people, watch your price, protect your rear, you couldn't be telling something true that exists in nature than 1 + 1 = 2. Because this is a different environment after the PCE 6 trading days ago, when it missed, and now there's no path but deteriorating global credit demand, and that's going to mean a flood of money coming in. And even with M2 going up, which it will, it's not going to necessarily be the fuel that people had received in the transmission mechanism with rising non-cyclicals if a lot of that M2 is going into the non-cyclicals. And then you have the transition of 1 new high in cyclicals and 29 new highs in non-cyclicals. And so just watch your rear, make sure
I think, can you hear him? Oh, there you go.
so that's it.
I could hear
That's
you
it for
now.
me.
But
David, we lost you there for
Someone
about.
had a question?
David, can you repeat the last few sentences? We lost you there, and it was pretty important.
Okay, so what I was saying is, in options, as you get closer to a strike, as you get closer to an expiration, you can't.
Oh no.
Yeah. Nobody can hear you, David.
I'm going to go. I'm
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
you're
lost
cutting off.
him. But
David, come out of your bunker.
right, get off the Boost Mobile, David. Come on. But right,
He's in his
guys,
bomb
this
shelter.
was a fire space. I'm probably gonna wrap it up here. Gonna go get some brunch with my wife and my mom. But this was fire. I'll probably do either Saturday mornings with Kat for sure, and then I'll probably throw on like a Sunday because I didn't realize how many people tune in the morning to hear the alpha. But this was fire. Really appreciate everyone who came up and spoke. Does anyone have any last minute things they want to say?
Nah, man. Shout out to you, bro. Shout out to the people in the space. I've been listening in. So
Thanks, brother. I'm happy.
Yeah, just follow
Hey, you never
follow
you never
everybody.
invited me, by the way.
I know.
You
I
were
just added
DMing.
you because I thought you'd like the group, brother.
Oh.
Heh.
I was like, wait a minute, was I
No,
imagining that?
this was a non-formal. You were in the last one, so I thought it was a go for this one. But this group is pretty alpha. You'll like it, trust me. And if you don't, you can leave. But I'm pretty sure you'll like it. Everyone in the group just talks to a minimum, just really posts like alpha shit. But all right, brothers, everyone, I appreciate everyone. Anyone have any last minute things they want to wrap up and say?
Yeah, buy more Bitcoin.
Yes, sir. But all right, gang,
Yeah.
Bitcoin is looking sexy. I just want to finish it up by saying we are chilling at above 67, so nothing to complain about. Let's get it. Let's have a good week. Mining our Bitcoin convention coming up, so take some profits. Obviously, don't be shocked when it's to sell the news, and hopefully it's not. Let's all get paid, gang.
Yeah. Have a good one,
Later,
guys.
guys.